firewall, where human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behaviors so you won't click. No complicated code, just tried and true brain science at play. Social engineering for good, the best defense is in your mind today.
Welcome to Phishing for Answers. The opinions expressed here are solely those of the individuals involved and do not reflect the views of their employers. Get ready, because the next live episode of Phishing for Answers is starting right now with your host, Joshua Krumbaugh, the CEO of Fish Firewall.
Psychology is the new firewall, where human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behavior so you won't click.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Phishing for Answers. Today we have Anthony Candeias, the CISO of WeightWatchers, with us. I'm so excited to learn from you today. Anthony, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hey Josh, thanks for having me on. I've been the CISO at WeightWatchers for the last year. I've been there about 4. I started my career off early on in Goldman Sachs, managing data centers, virtualization, infrastructure type work. I thought network engineering was my career path. Went down sort of the Cisco network engineering curriculum. From there, I found myself at the Ford Foundation, where I pivoted heavily into security. Built out their very first cybersecurity program. Got to investigate some fun stuff. Moved on to Columbia University, built out sort of their first modern security operations center as well. And when I came to WeightWatchers, I was sort of the same thing. There's a theme. I like building out stuff, and my goal was to modernize. They had a pretty sophisticated, security program, but moving to the cloud, so a lot of things didn't translate, and that's where I came in and tried to help them with their cloud journey.
Yeah, somebody, I forget even who said it, but I remember they were really wise. I don't remember why, but anyway, they said something about, if you're really good at your job, you'll actually eliminate it, or you can eliminate it sometimes. And that's what it sounds like you've done such a great job. You just have to move on and build the next program. So,
yeah, that's definitely one aspect of it. I enjoy building, right? I think that's one of the key takeaways from what I find.
It really is. I mean, it's not like there's this just set blueprint for how to do these things. And I think that's maybe part of what people don't understand, is that when you typically come in, you come into a mess. And you often come in the middle of emergency because, there's a reason they've decided to start looking at cybersecurity right now. And every single instance is unique to itself. And so, I have all kinds of, empathy, because I've been there. But it is a lot of fun to build out those programs and to see them mature. And, I love it when they get to the point where they don't need you and they know it all of a sudden. And you're like, no, you still need me.
There's always that value add. I think that's one of the reasons, I've kind of stayed in-house. I had a couple of opportunities to go kind of the consulting route. They all come circling around after grad school, and they're like, oh, come work for, one of the big 4 or something like that. And I didn't find it appealing. And the reason why, it's like, well, yes, you can go build, but you're there for a week. If you're lucky, maybe a month. And then you have to go move on to the next thing, where it's like, I like seeing things through. I like being iterative. I like being able to see how it grows year over year and be able to mature and, actually show an impact into the business, besides just coming in, making a quick recommendation and moving on to the next.
Well, and having been a red teamer, where that's what we did, we were the consultants. It was, how do I word this? There were so many times that we would come in and issue the same report each and every year. And I guarantee there were a lot of people like you in there working really hard to improve things. But from that consultant's perspective, it's like, well, I did no good. And I know a lot of people that have been a little bit disheartened about it, because they do see that same report being issued every year. And they're like, well, I thought I was doing this for a reason. So I'm with you. When you're internal, you get to follow through, not just issue the suggestions, but make sure that they're actually implemented. I remember one time at, I want to say it was the FDIC, man, we went back and forth with a developer. I've never been a big Citrix fan, and I've never found a Citrix box that I couldn't just pop like that, right? And it was the same thing when we got there, and so we probably went back and forth with the development team about 85 times. That's no, that's not an exaggeration. And we had to get the people at the highest levels of Cisco involved, or Citrix, sorry, not Cisco, Citrix involved, because if you followed their entire hardening guide, it still did not solve one of the problems that that we had, determined, or I identified there. But that is something I never would have got to see if I'd just been a consultant. You have to be inside, and these things don't just always solve themselves overnight. So yeah, love it.
Yeah, the answer is not always obvious, and there's so many nuances behind it, right? When we think about like, abstracting how security gets implemented, it's always a security versus usability conundrum, and there's ramifications of hardening things, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I've been really focused in on the last couple of years, is not just thinking about, okay, here's a problem and here's a fix, but what are the second and third, effects of doing so? Right.
Yeah.
It may be very obvious to say, hey, we need MFA enabled. And I think everyone could agree. But what are the second and third effects that you should be thinking of with that? Right.
Yeah.
Is there ways that these threat actors are going to try to circumvent MFA? Now you need to go detect that. Right. The journey doesn't end because you enable this.
Well,
So
and what
it's so important.
baffles me, so let's talk about that. What baffles me is I talk to people all the time and I say, well, what are you doing about consent phishing? You know what the answer is more often than not? Guess.
Nothing.
It's what's consent phishing. And that is the number one way you bypass the API, the multi-factor, is just by simply gaining API access. And the hacker would rather have API access than direct terminal access anyway. So, I mean, I do think that we have to be staying on top of not just what are the threats and how are we going to detect them, but we've got to train our people about this too, because if we're still just training them about don't enter your credentials, but we're not training them about don't authorize an application, we've got a really big blind spot.
Yeah. And I think that goes to the bigger problem of, like, number one, the malicious aspect of, the OAuth type of events, and that you can, just single sign on to anything these days with your creds.
And everyone's like, we have
monitor
MFA.
them.
Well, do you on it? Never mind. I digress. Continue.
Well, I think it even goes further than that, right? It's like, what about the, funky Chrome extensions that may solve all your problems of what you're Googling, right? There's so many different attack vectors that I think gets lost when we say, oh, here's a SIM and EDR, and here's the detections that we're going to go look for. But it's like, it's more nuanced than that these days, right?
It
Because
is.
like, getting software and authorization is commoditized in so many different ways because we've been so focused on user experience, and we should, right? Things should be easy, but at the same time, it comes with so many risks, and it's so hard to be able to build an appropriate level of monitoring, level of visibility on these things that are so nuanced.
So you bring up user experience, and I want to mention a concept. So recently I founded an open initiative that I call Social Engineering for Good, where we've got the first initial draft framework it's a framework for implementing human firewalls, where you can effectively actually change your culture. One of the things I talk about in there, and I bring it up because you mentioned user experience, is this formula that this famous behavioral scientist out of Stanford University invented. I think it's BJ Chips, something like that. But it's B equals map. B is the behavior we want. So we want our users to be more secure. So we'll just say that. And then map is all of the ingredients that we have to achieve the behavior change. And so M is motivation. Well, we know how to motivate our people, right? People are motivated by their family, their finances, and their ego. And those are the primary drivers. So we can use any one of those levers to motivate them to be more secure. The example, keep your paycheck secure. Be sure, be secure, watch what you click on, whatever you want, right? But you could put that into a pay stub, and all of a sudden we're anchoring it to motivation. The next one, A, is accessibility, and that is user experience. And what it says is it has to be easy. So when we're trying to change behavior, the easier it is to get for them to achieve that, the more likely they are to do it. And I always like to say here that when we make security the easiest option, it becomes the default option. And we saw that with Apple. When they had passcodes, they initially introduced them. They had, and I forget the exact numbers, but just very low adaptation. And then they pushed the, thumbprint, and instantly it jumped like 50%. So these, when we make it easier, it's we get better adaptation. I recently deployed passkeys across my whole org. Everyone loves it. I won't say they liked it during the implementation. Excuse me. But everyone loves it now. And so accessibility is huge. But the third one is prompting. And what it says is people like you and I might think about cybersecurity on our own because that's our job. But for everybody else, it's not their job. And so they won't think about it unless they're prompted to. And so if the main form of prompting is our security awareness training. So if we do it once a year or once a quarter, that's all the more we're prompting them. And that's why I really push this TikTok style training, because I had this CEO one time say, he's a hedge fund CEO. He gave me the exact dollar amount, how much his people's time was worth per hour. It was a huge number. And I was like, okay, I understand why you only get an hour. But then I'm thinking about how can we be effective at changing behavior with an hour? And I say, well, what if we break it into 30 seconds or 30-second chunks? Then I realized I can actually throw a 30-second video in front of the users twice a week, every week of the year, and we're not even at a full hour of time. And that is the power of micro training, is that we have to prompt them. Even our best users won't do it unless they're prompted. And there's a bunch of other stuff in there that talks about like cognitive biases and commitment bias, how people, when they say they'll do something, really do want to do it and they'll try to. The reason they don't adhere to our policy is because we write it so technically that they don't understand what they signed.
Yeah. There's a couple of things to unpack there. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind actually is I listened to a clip of Phil Venables, the CISO of, former CISO of Google Cloud. And one of the things he talked about was secure by design. And that's so important because it should just be part of that onboarding experience, that everything out of the box is secure by default. And if you want to make things insecure, there's the friction instead of the other way around.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. And we have to be not just design our products, but our systems that way.
Yep. And one of the things he mentioned was like MFA on GCP accounts, right? And it's like so obvious to folks like us. But when we talk about, just going right to developers and maybe smaller shops and things like that, the counterparts in his organization, he mentioned, they suspected a lot of pushback. And what actually ended up by happening was that they had a lot of support from their customers because it was, hey, this is what Google's telling us by default, instead of, oh, this is what the security team tells us they want us to do. Yep. So now you have a different authority saying that you should do things a certain way, and it carries a lot of weight.
Well, so, that goes to the framing effect too. How you word things changes how people hear them. And just changing that secure by design rewires how people are talking to their bosses and makes it more successful. There's so much there from a social engineering perspective that I see. It's just that's why I really feel we've got to bring the thousands of years of studying of the human brain and how we think into cybersecurity, because human error is not new.
Yep.
It's cybersecurity that's new. And
Absolutely.
our brain is built to be able to defend. And like we have reflexes. Something flies at your face, you don't have to think about blocking it. We can get our people that way with phishing, or any cyber attack. I just use phishing because it's the big one, right?
Yeah.
But I think it starts with psychology. We really do have to embrace it.
And I think that leads, to my other point that, you were mentioning the TikTokification of security content. One of the philosophies that most, B2C businesses have, and, we do the same thing at Weight Watchers, is we should be going to where the customers are, right? We shouldn't be trying to get our customers to us, right? Because we have a much bigger opportunity by going to where they already are and where they're operating. So we should follow the same thing in security, right? We should
Yeah.
know where our constituents, and we should be treating them as customers, right? Our fellow colleagues within the business that we need to do security awareness training on, and make sure we put ourselves in their shoes, right? We have a bunch of things that are driving that from a compliance perspective, and there's a couple of things we got to do to check the box. But the
Yeah.
reality of it is, the thing that hits home are the micro interactions that you're talking about. The consistent reinforcement is way more effective across the board, than just this one long compliance training that actually could be detrimental to the business because of the opportunistic or the opportunity time.
Well, and I was going to say, there's a lot of studies that have shown that people often get more susceptible to phishing and social engineering attacks after they did that training.
Well, because they take it and they just try to click next, next, next as soon as they can and say, I got my certificate. I'm done. I took it. I did my job, and no one's going to come hounding me or deactivate my account.
Yeah. I like to make the argument that no doctor should ever have to choose between saving a life and doing their security awareness training. They should be able to just go on their phone, do the training, and be done in the middle of walking between patient rooms. But I think too often we don't make extreme arguments like saving a life versus training. And so we think that's, our training is the most important thing in the world. To that person, it's not. It's not. It never is.
It's a nuisance.
It honestly took me founding a company and becoming a CEO I had this, I don't know, it was like a light bulb moment, but it was a weird one because I was in a meeting and somebody brought up cybersecurity, and there was this part of me that was like, I don't care about cyber. And I was like, wait. and I truly do. And it wasn't like that, but it was that it wasn't the priority right that moment. And it just helped me realize so much how those executives are thinking. And we often give them a hard time, but it's not that they don't care about cybersecurity. It's often that they don't care about the features of whatever product we're trying to sell.
Yeah.
But if we say, hey, I am worried about our customer data, then that changes everything.
Yeah, and I think it goes into a shift that we need to see more security leaders kind of hone in on. Is when I talk to CISOs or peers, and I'm like, "Oh, what's your biggest risk?" Right, kind of generalizing it. They might say data loss. They might say, a breach, etc. And I'm like, maybe you're
I'm
not
worried
thinking
about the
about it.
wire going to the wrong place personally.
Yeah, I think you're thinking about the problem the wrong way, right? Like, us at Weight Watchers, our biggest risk would be something harmful to our patients, right?
Yeah.
That's our biggest business risk in general, like having a safe, secure process to be able to facilitate, the medication and the experience of our customers. It's not a data breach. Data breach is on that list, but it's not number one. So I think when we think about, us being security and tech focused individuals, we need to abstract our thought process and really get more in tune with the business and what they do, to really surmise what the biggest risk actually is.
Yeah. No, I really agree. And one of the things that I try to do is with my clients and people, when I get an opportunity to help build these systems, is I actually love policy. I think people don't realize how powerful policy can be. And so I like to start off everybody. Well, actually, let me just change this slide real quickly. I like to move this over here. So this is one of the things that I like to start off with. So when we kick off for any security awareness, I say we need your CEO, and we need your CEO for at least just 5 minutes, because we need your CEO to send an email, and it's an email that only they can actually do, right? And so I truly believe that we start there, but here it is right here. And then we move over to this. I think this is the only policy that we need. And not true. I mean, you have other policies, but acceptable use has to be very simple. Don't let your kids play games on your computer. Don't use for personal use. But we need a master policy, and we make these things so long and comprehensive, like lawyers wrote them, when it should say, I pledge to do everything I can to keep the company's, in this case, patients, users, whatever, secure, because that keeps our customers and our paychecks secure.
Well, the one thing I would say on this is I do agree with it philosophically to keep it simple, but I find most people don't have ill intentions, right? And I think
they just don't know what they're not supposed to do.
exactly. So they could sign this pledge with the full intention of like, I'm going to do everything I can to keep our data secure, but do something that they just are, unfortunately ignorant, that they didn't understand the ramifications of taking that action, right? And that's on us to educate.
And that's why I think we have to do the continuous education, but you also have to have follow-up policy to this. And, an acceptable use might be top 10 rules for your device, and, just keeping it real simple for them to understand. So I think it does go way beyond this in policy. I think, though, that this just ties it to what really matters. And that's what you were just talking about was, what is it we're really here for? What really matters? But, I find it interesting. So I'll use WeightWatchers as an example. My mom was a lifetime member, and
Great to hear.
Yeah, no, she absolutely loved, went to every meeting. And so I am this crazy pepperhead, eat like, ghost peppers and whatnot. Accidentally started a mini con at DEF CON called PepperCon. We just had PepperCon 10. We had badges, we had swag, we had t-shirts.
Oh, man.
and we didn't have to peer pressure people into doing a pepper challenge. They lined up now. But I bring that up because it ended up causing me to have a pancreatitis attack, and I can't eat peppers anymore.
Oh, no.
But after that, I had to watch every bit of fat. And I'm talking to my mom. She's like, oh, that's exactly like WeightWatchers. And we were comparing it. And what I realized, what stood out to me was that WeightWatchers made it really easy to count calories, to count fat. And to me, because the people, my mom, didn't want to have to think about that. She had other things she was working on. And I think it's such a great analogy to cybersecurity, is that we need to just make it easy, sort of like WeightWatchers makes it easy not to think about, worry about all of that in cybersecurity. So
yeah, and that was the emphasis of the point system, right? That's the point system of WeightWatchers is what the intellectual property is of the business and what makes us a differentiator across the board, because every other diet app is focused on, hey, the calories, the macros, which we support as well. But when we say, how do we make this easy and go to the customer, right? It's much easier to figure out, your point budget when it's 20, 30 points, instead of like, oh no, you're going to have this many grams of this and that many grams of that. And then you got to watch your sodium intake. You got to watch this. And it's like, no, we abstract that all for you to make a great user experience, to help people live their best lives.
Yeah, no, and it worked. It absolutely worked for her. I mean, I know she struggled for years, and then she found your company and was very happy.
And I think to double down on, the synergies between WeightWatchers and cyber is a big part of our, offering is community, right? And that goes into what we were talking about of like continuous touch points of interactions with our, constituents, either in a weight loss setting or in a cybersecurity setting, right? Because if it just happens once a year in terms of education on either cybersecurity hygiene or, weight management, that has to be continuous, right? It's so easy to slip in both regards.
Yeah.
So having a community perspective is so important.
Oh, I agree completely. Well, I mean, this has been fabulous. We really haven't had a whole lot of time to talk tactics, and we're running low on time. So, but I
Yeah.
do want to ask you, tactically, now you are building out a new security awareness program. What are some of the things you bake in when you're building it out from the ground up?
Yeah. Again, so kind of the impetus of what I mentioned earlier is going to where our customers are, in this case, the employees of WeightWatchers. We don't want to have another platform that they need to go log into and go do things that they're not going to use, right? We
Love
know our
it.
users are in Slack. We're going to go to them. We're going to post there. We're going to have our messaging and video and content all there. They're going to, people are on Slack all day long, and that we can use that to our advantage, right? If we have to go say, hey, go log into this third party site that's under SSO, that's a tile in Okta, and there's all these other clicks associated to it and friction points. I
Have
feel
you
like
been
there's
listening to my talks that I give? Because I'm hearing myself here.
yeah,
That's awesome. I love it. Preach it. Preach it.
exactly. It's just the way to be successful in this space, right? For awareness, right? We're going to be able to create small, condensed content, continuously, right? We built some in-house automation. We built a simple Slack bot. We have a little basic MongoDB on the back end that has, a couple dozen different pieces of content that we distribute in timely ways, depending on maybe the time of year. We have some themed campaigns, or we just know something may be upcoming. We'll try to structure some content around it. And again, we're always going to where our customers are. So Slack is our primary way of doing that continuous iteration. We still have our LMS, and we have to do our compliance stuff, of course, and kind of bake that in. But what we find the most impact is those continuous touch points to where our employees are already monitoring and ingesting data on a continuous basis, rather than having to go through a separate workflow.
A for ability, P for prompting, M for motivation. You hit it all.
Yeah.
Love it. So I think this has just been a fabulous episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. Any final tips before we wrap up?
No, I think the big one for me is hone in on UX, right? Like I think that's lost on the security world in some ways. Either if you look at enterprise tools or just kind of experience managing a program, user experience will give you 10x the best tech.
I couldn't have said it better. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody out there, have a great weekend. It's a holiday 3-day weekend. So we will see you next week. And Anthony, stick with me 1 minute after the show. I want to talk to you about something. Everyone, have a great day. Thank you.